Hello, my name is Mayanka. I am accounts and finance trainer from Uplatz. Today, we will cover the topic of import and export under the GST. We will discuss import and export under GST. In this class, we will discuss import of services under the GST. In our previous video, we have discussed what is the import and export under GST. Means the introduction of such topic, and we have discussed different and important definitions which are relating to such concept. Because before the discussion of these provisions, it is very much important to understand the definition so that you can clearly understand each and every concept of such topic. So, and in part 2, we have discussed import of goods, import of goods under the GST. So now in this class, we will discuss import of services, importation of services under the GST. So now we will start our class. Import of services under the GST. The main topic is import and export under GST, and in this topic we will discuss the provisions which are relating to the import of services under the GST, importation of the services under the GST. Import of services. Import of services. First, we have discussed import of goods. Now, we will discuss import of services under the GST. Number 1, taxability of import of services. Now, first we will discuss taxability of import of services. Section 7 of CGST Act, read with para 4 of Schedule 1 of CGST Act. Taxability of import of services. Section 7 of CGST Act, read with para 4 of Schedule 1 of CGST Act. To be taxable, the transaction of import of services need to be supplied. For the purpose of taxability, the import of service should be supplied. If it is not considered as supply, then it will not be taxable, because in the case of GST there is the supply of goods or supply of service, then it will be taxable. If it is not supply, it is neither supply of goods nor supply of service, nor supply of service, then how it will be taxable in GST? So in this case, for the purpose of taxability, the supply should be there. So the import of service need to be supplied. While the main definition of the supply under Section 7 of CGST Act cover supply of goods, supply of service, or both, for the consideration in the course or furtherance of business. As per Section 7 of CGST Act, supply of goods, supply of service means when there is any supply of goods, supply of service, or both, for the consideration in the course or furtherance of business. In the course or furtherance of business. Clause B, the clause B therefore include services imported for the consideration. The services which are imported into India for the consideration, even if the import is not in the course of or furtherance of business. Even if such importation is not in the course or furtherance of business, is that if there is any import of service, for the consideration, but such importation is made not for the business purpose and not for the furtherance of business, but it will be considered as, or it will be known as import of service. It will be considered as service, sorry, it will be considered as supply, and it will be considered as import of services. It will be considered as import of service, means it will be considered as supply of service. So such import of service will be considered as supply of service. Supply under the IGST Act has been defined to mean the same as the supply under section 7 of CGST. Supply under the IGST has the same meaning which is defined in section 7 of CGST Act. Is that the supply means supply of goods, supply of service, or both for the consideration in the course or furtherance of business. As per clause B, import of service which is made for the consideration, even if such importation is made not in the course or furtherance of business, but still it will be considered as supply. It will be considered as supply. Significance of consideration and business test in taxability of importation of service. Now we will discuss the significance of consideration and business test in taxability of importation of service, because it should be, the importation of service should be for the business and for the furtherance of business, or it should be for the consideration. So we will check it. We will check the consideration and the business test in the taxability of import of service. As per section 7(1)(b), as per section 7, subsection B, subsection 1, clause B of CGST Act, import of services for the consideration, import of services for the consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of business, it will be considered as supply. If there is any import of services, and such import of service is made for the consideration, but it may be or may not be business or for the furtherance of business, but it will be considered as supply. It will be considered as supply. Generally, in general case, if there is any import of service without any consideration, then it will not be considered as supply. It should be for the consideration. However, business test is not required to be fulfilled for treating import of service. Business test is not required, because if it is made for business purpose or it is made not for business purpose, but it will be considered as supply. If it is made for the consideration, then it will be considered as supply. Then the import of supply of service will be considered as supply. However, business test is not required to be fulfilled for testing import of service. It should be made for the consideration. Furthermore, in the view of the provision contained in Schedule 1 of CGST Act, in view of the provisions contained in Schedule 1 of CGST Act, the import of services by a person from a related person, when there is any import of service by a person from a related person or from his establishment which is located outside India, in the course or furtherance of business, is it treated as supply, even if it is made without consideration. Is that as per the Schedule 1, the import of service which is made by the person from his related person, or from his establishment which is located in outside India, means establishment of distinct person. In this case, such import of service should be made Such supply should be made in the course or furtherance of business. In the course or furtherance of business, even if it is made without consideration, then it will be considered as supply. It will be considered as supply as per Schedule 1 of CGST Act. For the example, Mr. Ram, Mr. Ram exports some services from John. They are the relatives. They are the relatives without any consideration. Without any consideration, and such services are used by Mr. Ram for his business. For his business, then it will be considered as supply. It will be considered as supply, and it will be considered as import of service under the GST. There is no consideration, but as per Schedule 1 of CGST Act, it will be considered as supply. It will be considered as supply. A. Consent reading of a aforesaid provision with the provision of section 40. If we read the above provision with the provision of section 40, import of free services from the Google and the Facebook by all of us. Import of free services from the Google and Facebook by all of us without any consideration. Without any consideration is not considered as supply, because import of services from Google and Facebook by all of us without any consideration is not considered as supply, because it is not in the course or furtherance of business. If there is no consideration, then it should be in the course of furtherance of business. So in this case, it shall not be considered as supply. Import means downloading of a song for consideration for the personal use. For the consideration for the personal use will be considered as supply, because there is no business use, but there is the amount of consideration, even though the same is not in the course of furtherance of business, but there is consideration. So it will be considered as supply. Means, as per the Schedule 1, if there is any import of service without consideration, but it should be in course or furtherance of business, then it will be considered as supply. If there is any import of service, it is not in the course or furtherance of business, but it should be for the consideration, then it will be considered as supply. So one condition should be fulfilled. Import of some service by the Indian branch. Import of some service by the Indian branch from their parent company with outside India in the course or furtherance of business. In the course of furtherance of business, even if without consideration, then it will be considered as supply as per schedule, because it is made in the course or furtherance of business. Even if there is no consideration, but it is made in the course or furtherance of business, then it will be considered as supply, and it will be considered as supply, and it will be considered as import of services. Thus, import of services can be considered as supply. Thus, on the basis of this, the import of services can be considered as supply on whether there is the consideration. When there is the consideration on, when there is no consideration, then the supply should be made. If there is no consideration, then the supply should be made in the course or furtherance of business. Is that at least one condition should be completed. If anyone is complete, if anyone is fulfilled, then it will be considered as supply. We will explain it by the way of table. Number 1, nature of supply, consideration and business test. Import of service. Import of service. Import of service consideration necessarily required. If there is any import of service, then consideration should be there. Consideration should be there. Business test not required. If it is fulfilled, it is fine. Not fulfilled, it is also fine. Next point, import of service by the person from a registered person or from his establishment outside India. In this case, consideration is not mandatory. Consideration is not required. But business test should be there. Such import of service should be made in the course or furtherance of business. If it is made in the course or furtherance of business, then it will be considered as supply. Then it will be considered as supply. Otherwise, it will not be considered as supply. Otherwise, it will not be considered as supply. So, in the case when there is import of service from any person other than relatives, then consideration should be mandatory, whether it is for business purpose or not. In the case when there is any import of services from the related person, then business business it should be in the course or furtherance of business. Import of service into the territory of India is treated as when there is any import of services. When there is any import of services, then it will be treated as interstate supply. Import of service will be considered as interstate supply in the term of section 7 subsection 4, and thus IGST will be charged as per section 5. Import of services into the territory of India will be treated as interstate supply and IGST will be charged. Now we will discuss meaning of import of services. Meaning of import of services. Section 2 subsection 11, meaning of import of service. IGST Act defines import of service. IGST Act 2017 defined the meaning of import of service as supply of any service. Import of service means supply of any service where supplier is located outside India. Where supplier is located outside India. Number 2, recipient is located in India. Recipient is located in India. And the place of supply of service. The place of supply of service in India. If these three conditions, if all these three conditions are satisfied, then it will be considered as import of service. Then it will be considered as import of service. IGST Act defines import of service as supply of any service where number 1, supplier is located outside India. Supplier who supply the goods, who supply the service located in outside India. Number 2, the recipient in India. The recipient should be located in India, means the person who will receive the services should be in India, and the place of supply of service, it is also in India. If these three conditions are satisfied, then it will be considered as import of services. Import of services means supply of any service where supplier of the service is located outside India. Supplier of service is located outside India. Recipient of the service is located in India. Recipient of the service is located in India. And the place of supply of service. Place of supply of service is in India. Place of supply of service is in India. So this is the meaning and the definition of import of service. Section 2, subsection 11. Just like that. Service supplied by a supplier who is located outside India to the recipient who is in India, and the place of supply is also in India. The place of supply is also in India. So it will be considered as import of service. It will be considered as import of service. Now we will discuss such concept by the way of following example. We will discuss it by the way of example. Location of supplier. Location of supplier, location of recipient, and place of supply. whether it is considered or it is qualified as import of service or not. Number one, the location of supplier, London. The location of recipient is in India, and the place of supply is Delhi. So, as per the definition, the location of supplier outside India, the location of recipient in India, and the place of supply is in India. So the location of supplier is outside India, it is London. Location of recipient is in India, so it is in Delhi, in India, and the place of supply is also in India, so it is Delhi. So it is the import. It is the import of service. Next example, location of supplier, London. Okay. Location of recipient is the Paris. It is also outside India, and the place of supply is Paris. So it is not fulfill the condition. So it is not import of services. Next point, the location of supplier in Delhi, in India. So first condition is not satisfied. And the location of recipient is in Paris, and the place of supply is Delhi. It will not be import of services. In the last situation, the location of supplier is London, okay, and the place of recipient is in Delhi. Two conditions are satisfied. Third condition is the place of supply is in India, but in this example, the place of supply is London. So it will not be considered as import of supply. It will not be considered as import of supply. So on the basis of such example, we have discussed and we have properly understand what is the import of supply. We have properly discussed and understand the definition of import of supply, means meaning of import of supply, import of service or import of service. Thus, only where the location of supplier is outside India, when the location of supplier is in outside India and the location of recipient and place of supply both are in India, then such transaction will be considered as import of service. Then it will be considered as import of service. India is the sum of territory of its state and it also includes its territorial water and exclusive economic zone. India also includes territorial water, and exclusive economic zone. This is an extended definition. This is an extended definition of India over and above the area denoted by the expression of Article 1 of the Constitution, and it enables by the right of nation under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the State of the She. So the definition enables taxation of service received from outside India into any of the area of India that is outside India as per the definition in the Constitution, but within the 200 nautical mile, 200 nautical mile limited to the exclusive economic zone of the CGST Act. So this is the definition and the meaning of India, and this is the definition and the meaning of import of services. The place of supply is to be determined in the term of section 30 of the IGST Act. In this case, when there is any supply, just like there is any supply which is made, supply is received from outside India into the area which is outside India as per definition in the Constitution, but within 200 nautical miles, but within 200 nautical miles limited to the exclusive economic zone. In this case, the place of supply is to be determined as per section 30. The place of supply shall be determined as per Section 13 of IGST Act. Section 13 of the IGST Act provides for the determination of place of supply in case wherein in case where the location of the supplier of service where the location of supplier of service or the location of recipient of service is outside India. Section 13 provides for the determination of place of supply in case where the location of supplier where the location of supplier and the location of recipient of service is in outside India. Is in outside India. If the place of supply of service is in the territorial water, if place of supply in territorial water, the place is a supply is deemed to be in the place of supply is deemed to be in coastal state or union territory where the nearest point of appropriate baseline is located as per section 9. Thus the state tax component thus the state tax component of the IGST accrue to such a crystal state. The state tax of the IGST accrue to the such state crystal state. In addition to the place of supply being in India, the provider of the service being located outside India. The place of supply is in India and the provider of the service should be located in outside India and the location of recipient should be in India for the transaction to qualify as import of service. These three conditions should be satisfied for the import of service. This means that service should be received at the recipient place of business or fixed establishment in India. The service is required to be received at the place of business or fixed establishment in India. In the absence of such place, the usual place of residence, the usual place of residence of the recipient is taken as his location. Means when the registered place of business or fixed establishment is not available or when the service are supplied more than one location and we can't identify the location which is more attract or which is more involved such supply. In this case, the residence place of such person will be considered as location of recipient, as per the definition of location of recipient of service. So his residence will be considered as location of recipient for the service. Now we will discuss the person who is liable to pay tax on the importation of service. When there is any importation of service, then who is liable to make the payment of tax when there is the importation of services. In the case of importation of services, the recipient of the imported service who is located in India, other than non-taxable online recipient of online information database and access or retrieval services, is a person who is liable to pay IGST under the reverse charge. In the case of when there is any importation of the services, then the recipient of such imported services shall be liable to make the payment of IGST. The recipient shall be liable to make the payment of IGST under the reverse charge mechanism or as per the reverse charge mechanism. In case the service supplied by the person who is located outside India by the way of transportation of goods by the vessel from a place outside India up to the custom station of clearance in India. Then the GST shall be paid by the importer who is located in India. Is that in the case of import of goods, the importer is required, the importer is required to make the payment of tax. Is that in case when there is any service? In the case of service supplied by the supplied by a person who is located outside India by the way of transportation. Means transportation services provided by the person and the transportation is of the goods. So in this case there is the transportation service which is provided by the person who is located in outside India to the person who is in India. So in this case the importer who is located in India is required to pay the amount of IGST under the reverse charge. Under the reverse charge. In other words, in the case of foreign shipping lines providing inbound transportation of goods from place outside India to custom station of India, then IGST is required to be paid by the importer. The IGST is required to be paid by the importer under the reverse charge. However, in the case of Mohit Mineral Private Limited versus UIO 2020, VIL 36, Gujarat, dated 23rd January 2020. The Honorable High Court has held that no IGST is leviable on the ocean freight. No IGST will be leviable on the ocean freight for the services provided by a person who is located in non-taxable territory by the way of transportation of goods by the vessel from a place outside India up to the custom station of clearance in India. Entry 9 2 of the notification number 8 2017 and entry number 10 of notification 10 2017 has been declared as ultra virus the IGST Act due to the lack of legislative consistency and competency and accordingly had to be unconstitutional. It may be noted that in the following case, the contract for import of goods, the contract for import of goods was on CIF value, was on CIF value. Is that the contract for the transportation was entered by the seller to by the seller. The transportation of the goods is made by the seller, not by the importer. According to in the case of CIF basis, the contract is made between the exporter and the importer, and according to this the foreign exporter supply the goods he will supply the goods, means the buyer will not pay the amount of such transportation. Thus the importer will not be the recipient of service for the transportation of goods. In such case, he shall not be liable to make the payment of IGST. In the case of transportation of OIDAR services by the non-taxable online recipient, supply of OIDAR services is liable to pay GST. It is liable to pay GST by the supplier because the receiver is not resident. And in the case of importation of notified services through the ECO is liable to make the payment of such services. ECO is liable to make the payment of such services. So in the case the amount of GST on the import is required to be paid by the different person according to the situation. If there is any import of goods, then the supplier, then The importer is liable to make the payment of duty. If there is any import of service, then the recipient is liable to make the payment of GST according to the reverse charge mechanism. And when there is any import of notified service through ECO, then ECO is liable to make the payment of GST. When there is any importation of OIDAR services by the non-taxable recipient, then supplier is liable to make the payment of GST. So the tax is required to be paid according to the condition and according to the circumstances. Now we will discuss importation of OIDAR services. Importation of online information database access or retrieval services, section 40, section 14 of CGST Act. Online information database access and retrieval services is a category of services which is provided through the medium of internet, and it is received by the recipient without having any physical interface with the supplier of such service. Is that OIDAR is a category of service which is provided through the IT and by the use of internet, and such services are received by the recipient online without having physical interface with the supplier of such service. For the example, download of an ebook download of an ebook online for a payment would amount to the receipt of OIDAR service by the consumer. Means the consumer, he will download a ebook and he will make the payment to such a person. Then it is to be known as receipt of OIDAR service. In this case, there is no any information about the recipient, who is the recipient, the location of recipient, nothing information is there. Now we will discuss what will be the taxability of OIDAR services. The services which are imported by the business entity and non-taxable online recipient. Now we will discuss the taxability of OIDAR services when these services are imported by business entity and non-taxable online recipient. Importation of OIDAR services by a business entity. For any supply to be taxable under the GST. When any of the supply is made, then it will be taxable under the GST. The place of supply in the respect of subject supply should be in India. When we will determine whether it is supply or not. In this case, we will consider that the supply should be made in India. In case both the supplier of OIDAR service and the recipient of such service both are in India. If both the party, supplier as well as recipient, both are in India, the place of supply in this case, and in such case the place of supply would be the location of recipient of service. The place of supply shall be the location of recipient of such service. Is that it is in India. Then is that it would be governed by the default place of supply rules, and according to which the GST is required to be paid under the forward charge, means by the supplier. When the location of supplier and the location of recipient both are in India, then the place of supply will be in India. So it will be considered as normal supply, and according to normal supply, the supplier of the service is required to make the payment of GST. However, OIDAR services can also be provided. However, OIDAR services can also be provided online, even from a remote location. Means OIDAR services are provided through the use of IT, means through the use of computer system by the use of internet from a remote location outside taxable territory. In such case, where the supplier of such service is located outside India and the recipient is located in India and the recipient is in India and the place of supply would be in India. In such case, the transaction would be amenable to tax under the reverse charge. In this case, and in such a transaction will be taxable under the reverse charge is that if if the recipient is a business entity, if the recipient is a business entity, then the recipient shall be liable to make the payment of tax under the GST under the GST because the business entity is the registered person and it will require to make the payment of GST. Thus, in such cases, if the recipient located in India, then it will be liable to make the payment of tax under the GST under the reverse charge mechanism. And such a recipient, he will comply all the necessary provision or the compliances which are applicable on such a recipient. Importation of OIDAR services by the non-taxable recipient. If what will be the taxability when there is the importation of OIDAR services and such services are received by non-taxable person, non-taxable online recipient means the recipient is non-taxable. Now, what happens if the supplier is located in outside India and the recipient is in India and he is an individual consumer? He is an individual consumer and he is not registered under the GST. In such case, the place of supply would be in India. In this case, the place of supply would be in India and the transaction would be amenable to levy of GST. But the problem is that the recipient of the service is unregistered person. He is not registered in India. He is not registration. He is not registered in India. So in such case, so in this case, there is the problem how to collect the amount of tax. It would be impracticable to ask the individual in India to get registered and undertake the necessary compliances under the GST. It is impracticable to get the registration by such individual and to pay the amount of GST and all the GST comply. However, if the similar service is provided by an Indian service provider from within the taxable territory, means the service provider is in taxable territory to the Indian consumer, to the individual consumer in India. In this case, the same would be taxable under the forward charge because the location of supply is in India, the place of supply is in India. The normal provision will be applicable and the tax is required to be paid under the forward charge, means the supplier is required to make the payment of GST. Therefore, overseas supplier of such a supply would have to unfair tax advantage should be service provided by them be left out of the tax net. So, in such case, the IGST Act, in such case, the IGST Act provides that when there is any supply of OIDAR service by the person who is located in outside India to a person who is unregistered in India for the purpose unrelated of business or profession, or such service is supplied to governmental authority or to the local authority, then is that it is supplied to the non-taxable online recipient. So in this case, the supplier who is located in this case the supplier who is located outside India is required to liable to pay the amount of IGST on the supply. In such case, the supplier who is located in outside India is required to make the payment of tax IGST. For the purpose of this, there is a requirement to be registered under the GST in India, or he will appoint a person who will make the payment on the behalf of him. So in such case, the supplier, when there is any supply of service to the unregistered person, the supply of OIDAR service to the unregistered person, then the person who is the supplier is service is required to make the payment of GST. Now we will discuss the provision or facilities of OIDAR service by intermediary who is located outside India. Provision or facilitation of OIDAR services by the intermediary who are located outside India. Now, if an intermediary located outside India arrange or facilitate supply of such service to a non-taxable online recipient, it's in India. If there is any intermediary, he is providing the services and he is located in outside India to the person, means the recipient is non-taxable person and he is in India. The intermediary would be treated, in this case, the intermediary would be treated as supplier of such service, and when he will supply the service, he is required to liable to make the payment of IGST, and he must get registered in India for the payment of GST on the supply. He is required to be registered in India and he will make the payment of IGST. However, if the intermediary have nothing to do with the payment, or authorizing the delivery of service or setting the terms and conditions of the supply, and if the if his invoice clearly identify the service and its a supplier, then the responsibility for registration remain with the supplier. If the intermediary does not have the right of payment, authorizing of delivery or servicing or setting the terms and condition, then then the liability the liability and the responsibility of registration will remain with the supplier only. Means the supplier will take the registration and he will make the payment of GST. Now we will discuss provision enabling supplier of OIDAR services. Provisions relating to the supplier of OIDAR services who are located outside India to comply with the responsibility entrusted under GST law. Provision relating to the supply of OIDAR service located outside India to comply with the responsibility which are entrusted under the GST law. The supplier or the intermediary of OIDAR service share for the payment of IGST, they will take single registration under the simplified registration scheme. Means for the payment of IGST, such supplier or such intermediary take the registration under the GST. If the overseas supplier has a representative in India, if such a overseas supplier means the supplier has the any of the representative in India for any purpose, then such person shall get registered under GST, and such a representative will make the payment of GST on the behalf of supplier. He will make the payment on the behalf of supplier. In case the overseas supplier neither has a physical presence, in the case of the supplier of the supplier of such service neither have a physical presence in India nor he have any representative for any purpose in India, then he may appoint a person in India for the purpose of payment of tax. If he does not have physical presence, or he does not have any representative for the purpose of payment of tax in India, then he will appoint a person who will make the payment of tax on the behalf of such supplier, who will make the payment of IGST on the behalf of such supplier. Now we will discuss the examples of what could be or could not be OIDAR services. Now we will discuss what is the OIDAR services or what is not OIDAR service. In order to determine whether a particular service is a OIDAR service, the following tests need to be applied. To check whether such service is an online information database access or retrieval service is or not. Whether such service is OIDAR service or not. The following tests need to be applied. For the purpose of this, the following test is required to be met. Number 1. Services whose delivery is mediated by the IT service. The service is required to be delivered through the information technology over the internet or the electronic network. Plus, services are automated and impossible to ensure in the absence of IT. The services are automated and impossible to ensure in the absence of IT means a service cannot be run without the use of IT. If there is no information technology, then there is no OIDAR service. If both the conditions are satisfied, then it will be considered as OIDAR service. For the example, there is a software development service. In this case, the software development service is to be completed. It is to be completed through the internet and by the use of IT system. Without IT system, it cannot be done, or without the internet, it cannot be done. So, such service, the software development, considered as OIDAR service. OIDAR service when condition 1 as well as condition 2 both are satisfied, then it will be considered as OIDAR service. Thus, a service qualifies as OIDAR service if above two conditions has been satisfied. If both the conditions are satisfied, then it will be considered as OIDAR service. No. So the inclusive part of definition is only indicative and not exhaustive. This is so. Now we will discuss it by the way of example. Number 1, PDF document may be emailed by the provider. PDF document manually emailed by the provider. Service by the provider. Whether condition A is fulfilled. Whether condition A is fulfilled. Yes, the condition A is fulfilled. But there is no use of IT. So this is not a OIDAR service. In the second case, because in the first case it is manually made. It is manually made by the provider. So there is no use of information technology. So it is not considered as OIDAR service. Number second, PDF document automatically mailed. It is automatically emailed by the provider's system, by the provider system. So there is the use of information technology, means there is the use of IT. So this is to be considered as OIDAR service. Both the conditions are satisfied. Number three, PDF document automatically download from the site. It is automatically download from site. So both the conditions are satisfied. There is the use of internet, there is the use of IT, so it will be considered as OIDAR service. Stock photograph available on automative download. So it is OIDAR service because the both the condition A and condition B both are satisfied. Online course containing of pre-recorded video and downloaded PDF. So it is there is the use of information, there is the use of network, internet, and there is a use of IT. So it will be considered as OIDAR service. It will be considered as OIDAR. So on the basis of such example, we have understood which service will be considered as OIDAR and when it will not be considered as OIDAR. When condition A as well as condition B both are satisfied, then it will be considered as OIDAR service. Otherwise, it will not be considered as OIDAR service. Online course containing of pre-recorded video and downloaded or downloadable PDF plus support from a live tutor. Support from a live tutor. These are downloaded. So in this case, it will not be considered as OIDAR service. Next, individually commissioned content sent in digital form, is that in the form of photograph report. In this case, there is no use of IT. So it will not be considered as OIDAR service. It will not be considered as OIDAR service because there is the use of net, but there is no use of IT. So it is not OIDAR service. Now we will discuss indicative list of OIDAR service. Now we will discuss indicative list of OIDAR services. Website supply, web hosting, distance maintenance of program and equipment. Now we will discuss list of OIDAR services. List of OIDAR services. Website supply, website hosting, distance maintenance of programs and equipment. In this case, in such case, website hosting and website hosting and web page hosting. It is a OIDAR it is a OIDAR service. Automated online and distance maintenance program. Automated online and distance maintenance of program. It is a OIDAR service. Remote system administration. Remote system administration. It is also a OIDAR service. Online data warehousing, where specific data is stored, where the specific data is stored and retrieval electronically. It is also OIDAR service. Online supply on demand disk space. So these are all OIDAR services in the case of website supply, web hosting, distance maintenance of program and equipment. These all are OIDAR services. In the case of supply of software and updating, When there is any supply of software and updating, in this case, what will be the OIDAR service? In this case, what will be the OIDAR service? Number one, accessing or downloading software. Accessing the software and downloading the software, including procurement, accountancy programs, and antivirus software, plus updates. These all are OIDAR services. These all are OIDAR services because in this case, net as well as IT services or IT system will be used. Number two, software to block banner. Software to block the banner advance, otherwise known as banner blockers. These all are OIDAI services. These softwares are OIDAR download drivers, such as software that interface computer with peripheral equipment. Online automated installation of filter on website and online automated installation of firewalls. These all are online information database access and retrieval services. In the case of supply of software and updating, supply of image, text and information, and making available to database, making available of database. So in this case, accessing or downloading desktop theme, accessing or downloading desktop themes, these are OIDAR service. Accessing or downloading photograph or pictorial images or screensaver, the digitalized content of books and other electronic publications, subscription to online newspaper and journals, subscription to online newspaper and journal, bablogs and website statics, bablogs and website statics, online news, traffic information, weather reports. These all are OIDAR service. Online information generated automatically by the software from specific data, input by the customer, such as legal and financial data. The provision of advertising space, the provision of advertising space, including banner ad as on website or on web page. So this is also a OIDAI services. OIDAR services. Use of search engines and internet directories. Use of search engine, just like Google, Yahoo. These all are search engine and internet directories. This is also be considered as OIDAR services. Supply of music, supply of music, films and games, including games of change and gambling games and of political, cultural, artist, sporting, scientific, and entertainment broadcast and events. So accessing and downloading of music on the computer and mobile phone, accessing or downloading of music on a computer and mobile phone, accessing or downloading of jingles, accepted accepted ringtones or other sounds, accessing or downloading of films, downloading of games on the computer and on the mobile phone, accessing automated online games, accessing automated online games which are depend on the internet or other similar electronic network where where the players are geographically removed from one another. So these all are considered as OIDAR service. These all are considered as OIDER service because there is the use of internet, there is the use of IT without internet. These any of the service cannot be accessed. So both the conditions are satisfied. In this case, these all services will be considered as OIDER service. Now we will discuss service provided through ECO who are located outside India. When there is any service which is provided by ECO, economic, which is through the ECO, e-commerce operator. In this case, when the ECO located in outside India, electronic e-commerce operator is in outside India, then what will be the taxation? An ECO is required to pay IGST on the notified supply if these supplies are made through its portal. When there is any supply of service and supply of notified service which is made by ECO through its portal, then ECO is required to make the payment of GST. If the ECO does not have any physical presence in India, but there is a person in India who is representing, such supplier in India, such ECO in India, then such person is liable to make the payment of GST. Means such a representative person, he is required to make the payment of IGST on the behalf of such ECO. However, if the ECU does not have physical presence in India as well as he does not have any representative in India, in this case, the ECO will appoint a person for the purpose of payment of tax on such notified service. Means ECO, he will appoint a person and such person will make the payment of tax on such notified service on the behalf of such ECU. If ECU have physical presence in India, then it will make the payment of GST. If it does not have any physical presence in India, but ECO have a person, authorized person in India, then such authorized person will make the payment of IGST. If he does not have, if ECU neither have physical presence in India nor have any representative in India, then ECO will appoint a person who will make the payment of tax on the behalf of ECO. So, on the basis of this, we have covered the import of services. We have covered the provisions which are relating to the importation of services. Importation of goods is already covered by us in our previous class. Provision relating to the export and relating to the other provision are covered by us in our another video. For the full knowledge or for the full discussion of such topic, kindly consider all the videos of such topics so that you can properly understand such concept. Thank you so much for watching this video. Okay, bye bye and have a nice day.